Hello, we are Erasmus students, Aleksandra Szewczyk from Nicolas Copernicus University in Toruń.
And Victoria Nesteruk from University of Varmia and Mazuria at the University Pablo de Olavide in Sevilla, Spain.
Lecture Introduction to Sociology, lecturer Dr. Maria Jose. We present the podcast.
Karl Marx was German philosopher, economist, revolutionist, was born in 5 May 1818 in Trier, Germany, died March 14, 1883 in London, England. He was the oldest surviving boy of 9 children. His father, Heinrich, a successful lawyer, his mother, born Henrietta Pressburg, was from Holland. Both parents were Jewish, but his father, probably because of his professional career required it, was baptized in the evangelical established church. In October 1845, he matriculated at the University of Bonn. The courses he attended were exclusively in the humanities, in such subjects like as Greek and Roman mythology and the history of art. Here on the left side we can see Karl Marx as a young man, and in the right side we can see him with his wife. Influence: main German philosophy of history, utopian sociologist. Main focus: historical development of societies. Extreme critics of capitalism, supporter communism as socialism as a system traditional. Huge influence on the fate of the world in the 20th century, but little impact on mainstream economics. Definition of Marxism: it is a social, political and economic philosophy named after Karl Marx, of course. It examines the effect of capitalism on labor, productivity and economic development and argues for a worker revolution to overturn capitalism in favor of communism. Marxism posits that the struggle between social classes, specifically between the bourgeoisie and capitalists and the proletariat or workers, defines economic relations in a capitalist economy and will inevitably lead to revolutionary communism. The boundaries of Marxism are blurred, but Marxist scheme contained three main clear elements. First, a capital diagnosis of capitalism. Second, positive vision of communism. And third one, the concept of transition from one system to another. Inspiration of Marx. Marx's thought developed under the influence of two contradictory tendencies, determinism and activism. On the one hand, Marxism believed that the history and development of societies were governed by deterministic law, and the study of history would allow us to get to know them and predict future changes. On the other hand, he believed that this history could be changed after all.
On the slide, you can see structural social divisions. According to Karl Marx's concept, the division into classes in the only significant division of society. Every historical society is divided into two classes which differ in their relation to the means of production. On this basis, Marx distinguished a class that has the means of production, ruling, and a class that doesn't, oppressed. In capitalist society, Marx distinguished two classes. First, the class of the bourgeoisie, that is capitalist, owners of the means of production, and the second, proletariat wages. According to him, differences between classes are not only limited to economic difference, but also affect the way of life, differentiative access to power, education, and shape the worldview.
Oppressor and oppressed. The Communist Manifest opens with the declaration that the history all hit hero existing society in the history of class struggles. For Marx, the oppressors are the ones who own the means of production, and the oppressed the ones who don't own anything, just their force and they sell it to capitalism in order to ensure their livelihood. Cultural Marxism. The basic premise of cultural Marxism is to transform society so that it can absorb the ideas of the Cultural Revolution. Cultural Marxism sharply attacked the idea of conservatism, opposed certain old, well-worn patterns and morality based on religion. A special attack was carried out on the Christian religion to promotion of atheism and the rationalism trend began. Criticism of Marxism, economic issues. Critics of economic theories relate to Marxism most often point to the fact that nowhere in the world building an economy of the basis of these theories has proved successful, causing sooner or later disastrous consequences. In the ideological issues, there is a theory that the followers of Marxism make predictions to value that every event seems to confirm them, frequent changes to the theory to match events not relevant to it, the use of dialectics as a specific alternative to logic in which any contradiction can be explained by changing the meaning of the concept used. Defense of Marxism. In a social reality, they were hardly introduced in any of the communist or real socialist countries. To the defenders of Marxism also point out that when writing about the empowerment of the masses, Marx didn't mean the direct deterioration of the situation of the working class, but the deterioration of its position in comparison with the situation of the possessors, and therefore increase in social defenses, a phenomenon that actually takes place in countries on minimalist state participation in the economy.
Friedrich Engels, born in 1820 in Berlin in Germany, he was educated in a conservative and Calvinist family, but as he grew up he separated from these ideas. He met Karl Marx, Reichsche Zeitung, where he worked as redactor. At first they didn't get on well as their opinions were both very radical. He traveled to Manchester, England, where he participated in working class movement which criticizes industrialism. In 1844, he collaborated with Marx. Due to Engels' economical situation, he supported and protected Karl during almost 40 years of collaboration. They both published "The Capital".
Dialectical materialism. For Marx and Engels, materialism means that the material world, predictable to the sense, has objective reality independent of mind or spirit. They didn't dent the reality of mental or spiritual process, but affirmed that ideas could arise, therefore, only as product and reflections of material conditions.
Now let me say something about political theory. Most people agree that we need to improve our economic system. Yet we are also often keen to dismiss the ideas of capitalism's most famous and ambitious critic, Karl Marx. This isn't very surprising. In practice, his political and economic ideas have been used to design disastrously planned economies and nasty dictatorships. Nevertheless, we shouldn't reject Marx too quickly. We ought to see him a quite who diagnosis of capitalism is help us navigate toward a more promising future. Capitalism is going to have be reformed, and Marx's analyses are going to be part of any answer. Marx was born in 1818 in Germany. Soon he became involved with the Communist Party, a tiny group of intellectuals advocating from the overthrow of the class system and the abolition of private property. He worked as a journalist and had a flee Germany, eventually settling in London. Marx wrote an Erasmus number of books and articles, sometimes with his friend Friedrich Engels. You can see several book titles on the slide. Mostly, Marx wrote about capitalism, the type of economy that dominates the Western world. It was, in his day, still getting going, and Marx was one of its most intelligent and perspective critics. These were some of the problems he identified with it. The first problem is modern work is alienated. One of Marx's greatest insights is that work can be one of the sources of our greatest jobs. But in order to be fulfilled at work, Marx wrote that workers need to see themselves in the objects they have created. Think of the person who painted the picture shown on the slide. It is beautiful, amazing, and interesting. It's an example of how, at its best, labor offers us a chance to externalize what's good inside us, but it is increasingly rare in the modern world. Part of the problem is that modern work is incredibly specialized. Specialized jobs make the modern economy highly efficient, but they also mean that it is seldom possible for any one worker derive a sense of real contribution they might be making to the real needs of humanity. Marx argued that modern work leads to alienation. In other words, a feeling of disconnection between what you do all day, who you feel you really are, and what you think you ideally be able to contribute to existence. The second problem with capitalism is modern work is insecure. Capitalism makes the human being utterly expendable, just one factor among others in the forces of production that can ruthlessly be let go the minute that cost rise or savings can be made through technology. And yet, as Mark knew, deep inside of us, we don't want to be arbitrarily let go, we are terrified of being abandoned. Communism isn't just an economic theory. Understood emotionally, it expresses a deep-set longing that we always have a place in the world's hearts, that we will not be cast out. The first problem is workers get paid little while capitalists get rich. This is perhaps the most obvious objection Marx had with capitalism. In particular, he believed that capitalists had reduced the wage of the workers as much as possible in order to skim off a wide profit margin. He called this primitive accumulation. Whereas capitalism sees profit as a reward for technological talent, Marx was far more damning. Profit is simply theft, and what you are stealing is the talent and hard work of your workforce. However much one dresses up the fundamentals, Marx insists that at its crudest, capitalism means paying a worker one price for doing something that can be sold for another, much higher one. Profit is a fancy term for exploitation. The next problem with capitalism is very unstable. Marx proposed that capitalist systems are characterized by a series of crises. Every crisis is dressed up by capitalism as being somehow freakish and rare and soon to be the last one. Far from it, argued Marx, crises are endemic to capitalism, and they are caused by something very odd. The fact that we are able to produce too much, far more than anyone needs to consume. Capitalist crises are crises of abundance, rather than, as in the past, crises of shortage. Our factories and systems are so efficient, we could give everyone on this planet a car, house, access to a decent school and hospital. That's what's so arranged Marx and made him hopeful too. Few of us need to work because the modern economy is so productive. But rather than seeing this need to work as the freedom it is, we complain about masochistically and describe it by a projective word, unemployment. We should call it freedom. There's so much unemployment for a good and deploy admirable reasons. Because we are so good at making things efficiently. We are not all needed at the coal face, but in that case we should, through Marx, make leisure admirable. We should redistribute the wealth of the massive corporation that make so much surplus money and give it to everyone. The last problem with capitalism is capitalism is bad for capitalists. Marx didn't think capitalism were evil. For example, he was actually aware of the sorrows and secret agonies that lay behind bourgeois margin. Marx argued that margin was actually an extension of business. The family was fraught with tension, oppression, and resentment, with people staying together, not for love, but for financial reasons. Marx believed that the capitalist system forces everyone to put economic interests at the heart of their life, so that they can no longer know deep honest relationship. He called this psychological tendency commodity fetishism because It makes us value things that have no objective value. He wanted people to be free from financial constraints so that they could at last start to make sensible, healthy choices in their relationships. The 20th century feminist answer to the oppression of women has been to argue that women should be able to go out to work. Marx's answer was more subtle. These feminist instincts merely property, human slavery. The point isn't that women should imitate the sovereignty of their male colleagues, it's that men and women should have the permanent option to enjoy leisure. Why don't we all think a bit more like Marx? An important aspect of Marx's work is that he proposed that there is an insidious, subtle way in which the economic system colors the sort of ideas that we ending up having. The economy generates what Marx termed an ideology. A capitalist society is one where most people, rich and poor, believe all sorts of things that are really just value judgments that relate back to the economic system. That a person who doesn't work is worthless, that leisure, beyond a few weeks a year, is sinful, that more belongings will have us happier, and that worthwhile things and people will invariably make money. In short, one of the biggest evils of capitalism is not that there are corrupt people at the top. This is true in any human hierarchy, but that capitalism ideas teach all of us to be anxious, competitive, conformist, and political complaint. As Marx himself declared, and we deeply agree, philosophers until now have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Marx fought not only idealistic systems, but also those that seemed to be close to his position. He disregarded positivism, did not recognize intermediate position and compromises. Huck considered his only world opponent, although he was his opponent in terms of view. Philosophers and historians were unaware of the groundbreaking importance of Marxism, which was initially regarded as a political rather than a scientific philosophical view. The continuation and development of Marx through Islamism, which appeared at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, a new stage in the development of Marxism. Thank you for your attention.